I would like to welcome everybody formally to this, the second lunchtime discussion of the Together 2021 Disability Film Festival. I'm Ju Gosling, I'm Artistic Director of Together 2012, and I'm a Festival Director. I'm a white woman with pale olive skin. I have green eyes behind black plastic glasses and black plastic wrist braces. I've got silver coloured jewellery and a blue-green long-sleeve t-shirt. Behind me, you can see a little bit of our Together 2012 graffiti banner, and you can also see a holographic sparkly silver tablecloth which has just been thrown for convenience over a bunch of musical instruments. I'd like to start by thanking our funders, Film London, Arts Council England, and the National Lottery Community Fund, and our access workers for today, Paul Michaels, who is our British Sign Language interpreter, and Hilary, who is our captioner from Global Real-Time Captioning. To access the captions, click on the CC button, which is usually, but not always in Zoom, just to keep us guessing, on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you would like to access the captions as a full transcript, a lot of people find that easier, then click in the live chat. You will find the captioning link to stream text. To get the live chat up, you go to the second of the view buttons that Zoom offers, the one that's usually, but not always, on the left top corner of the screen, and just open View Live Chat. You'll then be able to message each other as well as ourselves. So if you'd like to join in the discussion with your camera and microphone on and you haven't come in as a panellist, let us know in the live chat and my assistant Emily will sort that out for you. You can, and like I said, I've just said where the live chat is. So in the meantime, I'm going to start with a bit of scene setting. 2 years ago, almost no one had heard of Zoom. As someone who needs support to leave the house and can't access voice-only calls, I often used to get people to meet via Skype, but everybody said this was impossible. 2 years later, most people with digital access have tried Zoom at least once. During successive lockdowns, it's become a place to meet, to socialise, to play, and to create and consume culture together. For disabled people and other shielders like myself who haven't left the house for 2 years, it's become a lifeline. For an increasing number of filmmakers, disabled or not, Zoom has become a critical part of the production process. Why take time out to travel to meet in person, even if you can, when you can get a room full of people together on Zoom? Regardless of the pandemic, it's better for the environment, saves precious time, and rehearsals are also increasingly taking place over Zoom with apps to remove latency and considerable savings in terms of rehearsal room hire, even if you weren't having to use lateral flow tests. While this removes some barriers for many disabled people, it creates others for some, of course. But at present, there's very little choice. However keen we are to get together in person, we're not dying to go out. The issue for disabled filmmakers is not being forced to work on Zoom, but being forced to attend in person when there's no need. Now, in 2020, we saw a range of Zoom plays and films being released. The majority involved stories where Zoom was central to the plot, with individual characters themselves using Zoom, whether or not the story related to the pandemic. Some funded productions used a blended approach, using 4K cameras to capture footage in people's homes alongside Zoom, but most did not. Even in 2020, though, some filmmakers broke the mould, with companies of people with learning difficulties leading the way. I'm going to show you in a moment 2 excerpts from films we screened yesterday. Tail Feather Dance have 2 films in the dance programme this year, both of which involve dancers in their individual homes, while Bloomin' Arts produced Shakespeare's The Tempest almost entirely on Zoom. However, this may just be the start, and this is what I want you to think about while we're watching just a couple of excerpts. Radio plays have always allowed us to tell stories where the visual sumptuousness of a film set is replaced by our imagination. Zoom allows us to bring our voices together wherever we are in the world. But unlike radio, Zoom produced work also enables us to add captions and a vast range of visuals, including digital imagery and animation. Is this really just a stopgap until most people can get together in person again? Or is it a new hybrid art form in its own right? We'll be bringing in filmmakers, including people who've made films on Zoom that will be shown today, but I don't want to preempt that, which is why we're just going to have a quick look at a couple from tomorrow. So this is a little bit of The Tempest.
What is it thou commands?
My liberty!
No, I will not free you yet. Soon you shall be free. You owe me first. Do you not remember how Sycorax, noble of Caliban, who is in my service, trapped you in a tree for 12 long years and I freed thee?
Yes, master!
Do as I say and I shall free thee.
Yes, master! Yes, master! Yes, master!
And we'll join hands when you've got
Awake, dear heart, awake.
The strangeness of your story puts inherentness in me.
Shake it off. Come on, let's go and visit Caliban, my slave.
'Tis a villain, sir. I do not love to look on.
Thou poisonous slave, got by the devil himself, upon thy wicked dam come forth. Taxis, hence, fetch us in fuel.
You guys are food. I eat my dinner.
Boy, that slave.
Oh! This island is mine. It taught me language. I know how to curse. The red plague with you are teaching me my language.
You're a white sea confined to this cave.
I'll rack thee with old cramps, fill all thy
So that was The Tempest by Bloomin' Arts. And I'm just going to read very quickly something they've written because they're not able to be here today. So they say Bloomin' Arts provides opportunities for people with learning and multiple disabilities to develop skills and enjoy performing and working in the arts. Undeterred by a pandemic and new technological ways of working, the Bloomin' Arts Theatre Company ditched their dreams of developing and touring a physical production and launched themselves into working on Zoom to continue to produce quality shows to share with the world. Learning how to become their own technicians, acting for film in a small confined space, communicating in a very different way, they were not content to do drama exercises and put things on hold. Instead, they decided to produce a unique adaptation of The Tempest and tour to online festivals instead. Over 9 months, we laughed, cried, and kept connected through our shared love of all things dramatic, especially Shakespeare. We're happy to invite people to join us in this magical journey created within the boundaries of our own islands. So there's some quotes. Andrew says, I would do a film on Zoom again. I think it's a great way to connect people who may not be able to get together physically. We could act with people all over the world. Isabel said, I really enjoyed doing a film on Zoom. It was very interactive. I would like to do it again. It's so much fun. Ellie said, I would do it again. I enjoy reading all the scripts. Amy said, I liked doing Zoom, especially with my mum helping me. I loved being aerial, flying around my front room. I found it easier learning lines for Zoom because we could stop and start and do it in bits. Now, that's not actually everybody is saying that. There are other people saying, you know, I've done it already, I'm ready for something new. But I think it's a bit of a reflection of just how much we can achieve. I mean, there have been very, very, very few Shakespeare productions by people with learning difficulties out of all of the millions of Shakespeare productions that have been produced around the world. And to see one produced on Zoom in a pandemic, I think is something quite extraordinary. So I'm just going to show you, for something completely different, a little bit from Tail Feather Dance's Perfect Planet.
You are so beautiful to me. You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see? You're everything I hope for. You're everything I need. You are so beautiful to me. You are so beautiful to me. You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see? You're everything I hope for. You're everything I need. You are so beautiful.
So if you would like to see the whole of that film, it's available on our program. That's Perfect Planet in the Dance program. What we do on the day after we've shown a program is any films that have got publicly available links, we embed those in the program instead. So you're also able to watch The Tempest. So what I'm wondering now is if people who are on the panel would like to switch their cameras and microphones on, or just your microphones indeed, if you don't want to be seen on camera. If you're a filmmaker, you would like to join our panel and you're down as an attendee, just pop something in the chat and we will swap that over. And Jemima was just saying that's really interesting editing. And while people are joining in, I think that's absolutely right. I think digital effects and digital editing is absolutely key to this kind of work. And like I say, animation, I think, has got a huge role to play in the future. Could we pop a spotlight on Jessica, please, Emily, and then see who else wants to join us? Jessica or JC, I'm not quite sure which, because I've got
Jessica's
both.
fine.
Would you
That's
like
fine.
to introduce yourself briefly and tell us a bit about your film, please?
My name's Jessica Cheeseman. I'm a white woman. I have pale skin and brown eyes. I've got long fair hair. I've got my glasses on my forehead, and I'm resting them on my head, and I'm wearing a black sweater. And behind me is my wardrobe, which is white. So I've got a film in the Animate program, um, and it's a song I wrote um, about autism. I'm late diagnosed autistic, and I'm a musician, so I wrote a song and I combined it with a film of my performance as well as animation. I wanted to use film and song together to explain um, autism from my perspective, and at least an aspect of it, how to connect with other people, how the difficulties that surround connecting with other people, because speech is only a small part of communication. So and sometimes that's what you miss when you're on the spectrum.
And you combine animation and live action. And from what I recall, and forgive me if I've got this wrong, because I've seen quite a lot of films this weekend, a lot of it is sort of, it's a static camera indoors, isn't it? So it's not exactly on Zoom, but it easily could have been.
Yes, I think the thing that interested me about this panel is my brother's also on the spectrum. He's nonverbal, and when the pandemic happened, we were really scared because he has a routine where he comes home to his family, and we were scared that the lack of routine would really mess with him, and but we started talking on Zoom or on WhatsApp actually, but with the camera, and it was really good for him because, like me, we both hate the phone. So being able to see the person was a really big deal, and I think it would be useful because yes, it encourages collaboration. It encourages people to be creative. Sometimes it's very difficult to get outside. If you have mobility issues, it's difficult to get outside. If you have anxiety issues, it's also difficult to get outside, and it's a challenge to go and meet people. So we have this free software. This technology is getting better all the time, and it encourages more like freedoms. And if you're a creative person, you can do it from home more. So there's huge advantages with this, I think.
Yeah, and I think all of those are absolutely, some of the top boxes to tick. It's easier to communicate with people, it's much easier to get out and about. And I think that's right. I mean, I've often said in the past, before the pandemic, all I need, you wouldn't think it was too much to ask for, but all I need is step-free access. But I could easily have a mental health difficulty that would stop me going out, whether there was step-free access or not. And I think you're absolutely right. People just don't think about all of these other access issues, do they? So
No.
we've got Jemima says she just wants to join in the chat. That's absolutely fine. Anybody who puts anything into the chat box, I will do my best to read out. Can I persuade anybody else at the moment to pop their camera on? Possibly Jill, Kyle, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Anybody who's perhaps been doing research in Zoom, because it, as we were saying, it isn't just about making it. One of the things that I think is great, even if you're going to substitute visuals afterwards, is that being able to have that real-time interaction with actors, and indeed, with people having discussions, right? So we're just going to pop a spotlight on Jill for me, please, Emily. Brilliant. Hi, Jill from Sensi. Would you like to just tell us a little bit about your film, please? Because we're going to see that, well, it's on today's programme, so some people are watching it already, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having us here in this festival. We're so excited. I'm joining you from Canada. I am a white woman with blue eyes and blonde hair, wearing a blue toque, because I said I was from Canada, and a black hoodie. But can I tell you about Sensei? We produced that film earlier this year in the spring. Of course, we were in lockdown here, so we had to do a lot of meetings and pre-interviews on using Zoom, and it's been amazing. Um, just to connect with the artists and everyone who, just it was so much more convenient for people. Um, and then a good portion of our film was actually recorded on Zoom because in the story is about Natalie Olson, who is the first Canadian with Down syndrome to achieve her black belt in Wado Kai karate, and we join her as she's training for her third degree now, and so the entire karate organization is a very traditional organization, as you can probably imagine. And for them to have to pivot and then put this 8-hour grading, which is what they normally do, online and have everyone joining from their living rooms and their garages and makeshift practice areas, it was quite a testament to, I think, whatever that the spirit of everyone just kind of overcoming the challenges of the pandemic and doing something a little bit out of the box for them. And I mean, I thought it was really quite charming because you'd see, people doing their karate, and then there's like a dog going by in the background, or like one of the kids comes by and waves at them and stuff. So um, it was a necessity for us, but I thought it added a really interesting element to our story as well.
And how did you find the technical challenges of recording sound on Zoom?
Yeah, it was we were just recording computer audio because we didn't have the ability to get to everyone's dojo and record them there. So it was what it was. But I think by then everyone was just so used to it. As you say, it was a couple of years ago. People were like, "Oh, it's such an inconvenience to use Zoom, and we can't meet on it, and we have to be in person." And now it's just it's second nature now. So that's nice.
I think an experience that I think all of us have had is however technically literate we thought we were when the pandemic struck. Everybody was really, really stretched. And I spent a lot of the first 6 months with people saying, "Oh, I just don't know what I'm doing." And saying, "Actually, I know more than you, but I'm still just as stretched doing what I'm doing as you're stretched doing what you're doing." And that sort of, I think almost that joint kind of uncertainty, but also skill sharing and learning, I think it's created and continues to create a huge amount of experimentation. And again, I think some of it's the editing, isn't it? If we didn't have the sort of digital filters accessible to us now, as soon as I get something off Zoom, I stick a sound filter on and I stick an equalization on and adjust the loudness. And I can do that so easily in a way that, maybe even 5 years ago wouldn't have been possible. Did you find that there's more technical challenges when you're editing off Zoom footage?
Yes. I mean, there is different levels of quality from the different cameras. So that was something that there's only so much we could do. And as well, we just had an enormous volume of it. We had two computers recording the grading itself because we wanted to be able to sort of pin people and spotlight them, as well as see the entire kind of grid of everybody. So yeah, it kind of broke the computers a couple times.
Yes, I mean, I think certainly Zoom certainly does go through kit, doesn't it? Did you have any thoughts about, I mean, what you've managed to do is make a relatively traditional documentary using very untraditional forms of filmmaking. Did it, or has it indeed led you to think about future projects where Zoom might almost become part of the aesthetic?
I haven't considered it yet because I think we were struggling with using it as an aesthetic. We had a lot of discussions as filmmakers, and I said I kind of like it because it's adding this other texture. And I think with documentary filmmaking in particular, as long as you can more or less understand what people are saying, I think you're a lot more forgiving if the visuals aren't perfect. So for me, I thought that added a nice element of sort of realism and authenticity.
And I think it can go completely the other way. There's another production from yesterday from Tail Feather Dance, which is Alice in Wonderland, which I have to say is the sort of darkest, most twisted kind of take on Alice in Wonderland I've ever seen. And I think what they did is rehearse it over Zoom. It got people in very often individually, because I think then it was over the summer when the infection rates were much lower, to record, but recorded against green screen. So all of the backgrounds, every single background in the whole of the production is a digital background, which I think is another alternative to the idea of animation. But I just love the way people are mixing up this live action, whether it's live action filmed on Zoom, live action filmed on a 4K camera you've dropped off but directed over Zoom, you know, working on green screen, which of course is something increasingly, again, people can do from home, and then mixing it all up to create this kind of new format. I have a friend indeed who is based in New York, who's a writer, and in his 20s, many years ago, he had a lot of plays produced on the BBC radio, and one that really stuck in my mind was about the radioactive stomach of the ghost of John Wayne. Now, it's hard to see how you could ever do that on film. You know, I think the special effects guys, the Foley artists, had great fun making the sound effects for the radio, but how wonderful it would have looked if it could have been this hybrid digital production with some kind of visuals that were nothing to do with real life, but still this amazing sound, because sound is only 50% of film. And I think when we don't see the images that we could see, I kind of feel radio is a little bit wasted in that sense. Maria Zani is saying she agrees she did stop motion animation, and Julie is saying it brings Dogma style of filmmaking to a whole different level. Zoom filmmaking is so innovative. I like the international aspects of collaboration, and unless Jill is able to now give me a quick definition of dogma making, I'm going to ask Julie to stick that in the chat, because I wouldn't like to attempt it. And I know, Julie, that's something that you've enjoyed doing before. So, and again, if anybody else wants to join in, there's no such thing as a stupid comment. I mean, this is really literally us just having a chat. And here's Kyle. Fantastic. Can we just pop a spotlight on Kyle and maybe take Jessica's off for a minute while her camera's off? So great to meet you, Kyle. We had your film yesterday. Would you like to just introduce it for people?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kyle. I'm a white woman. I'm wearing a gray hat and glasses on my face. My left eye has a little bit of a deformity. I am wearing I think it's orange quarter zip, and I am in front of a painting in a hotel room, in bed. I made the film Fraser Syndrome and Me. It's a short documentary. I have the disorder Fraser Syndrome. I was the 75th person in the world to be diagnosed with it. There's about 250 of us now. I was able to travel a good amount of Europe and meet 6 others living with it. 3 of them were in the UK. One was in Prague, a little baby in Germany, and in California in the US. There was Noah, who was our only male in the film. But we were lucky enough to post or pre and all that. We did everything before COVID. But the fascinating part has been, because I want to, it's only 20-minute film right now. I would love to continue it at some point. So I would like to, I've been doing the pre-work for that all on Zoom, which has given us a new opportunity to meet with people beforehand. And we're all spread out. It's such a rare disorder that it's all across the country, the world, that now I can meet families on Zoom for the first time and kind of establish a relationship. And hopefully one day when we can travel, we'll have that ground to work with, which will be really nice.
Yes, Jemima Hughes, who's an animator and poet, is just saying in the chat that, hi, Kyla Ann, I watched your film yesterday. I thought that was really interesting. Yes, I thought it was a great film. And if anybody missed it, yes, look out for it the next time. Julie, we're still looking for somebody to define dogma filmmaking. Where are you in the world today, Kyle?
I'm in Arizona, Mesa, Arizona. I am at another film festival.
I dread to think what time it is, but do you want to tell us?
It is currently 6:31 a.m.
I always say this while we're online. Part of everything that's been fundamental to what we do is sharing free food and drink, and it's so sad, particularly when there you are, kind of not even breakfast time, and we can't just reach through the screen. And I think that's where the limitations of Zoom really, really kind of stick in there. So in fact, I was fascinated to know what your next film was going to be. You know, it's a question that always arises when I see first films come through. So, do you see this becoming a feature documentary?
Absolutely. It was my senior project from university. So I had the time limit. I couldn't go past it. So it's 20 minutes by force, and I could have made it an hour already. And now, with the popularity of the film, you Google Fraser syndrome, and now the film comes up, which is amazing. It's all I ever wanted. Uh, so I'm getting contacted by more and more families, and I want to include them because everybody's voices deserve to be heard. And I can only do that in the future.
And do you think that Zoom is already beginning to give you kind of some alternative aesthetics? You know, that ability to, I don't know, capture footage at different times as you're researching it, or for families to contribute their own footage over Zoom, people, families to draw, because you have quite a rich texture in the
Mhm.
short. And it has to be said, when I saw myself as a filmmaker rather than a film festival director, I could never understand why everybody wanted these short films. And then, of course, you come to the festival and you try and program everything into, well, we go over 2.5 days, and it's still very, very, you can fit in a fraction sometimes of what's been submitted. Suddenly you get the point of the 3-minute films, but so many stories a story needs to be told the length it needs to be told. And that is, the more complex the story, the longer it needs to be. Maria Zani is saying, I'm so happy for you, Kyle. I started with short films, which is great. And Julie is just popping back in to say, dogma filmmaking derives from the film Dogma the Idiot. No, the Dogma film The Idiots in the 1990s. It was a Danish collective of filmmakers creating principles by which films were made using handheld cameras with no special gimmicks or effects and cheap on location shooting. And I think this idea of cheapness, which is all relative, if you're living in a hotel and using a food bank, there's nothing cheap about having access to digital filmmaking. But I remember making my PhD documentary back in the 90s on a Hi8, and that was a sort of 1-hour documentary. And it had to be about making, using the aesthetic that, it was overcoloured. So I thought, okay, I'll make it more like Super 8 films for the 60s. You got a lot of dropout, and professional editors were saying, you can't use that footage. And I'm saying, but the content's great. The dropout really doesn't matter. I think we've become, with everything TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, we've become much more used to focusing on the content, but at the same time having these kind of heightened aesthetics elsewhere as well. Oh, and Jemima has got something to say, which is great. And no, you don't have to have the camera on at all. Anybody who wants to speak but without the camera, whether that's through a communicator or any other way, that is absolutely fine. So I think what we need to do is, let me just try. See, this is the thing. We talk about how wonderful Zoom is, but the reality is that we're always learning. So can you, Emily, allow Jemima... Oh, Jemima, you've got your microphone on. If I stop talking, let's see if we can hear you.
There's a little delay. It will speak. Jemima, the noise you were hearing was Jemima activating her switch with a throat-activated microphone. Come on, computer, speak. No, it hasn't yet. Sorry. Again. Okay, sorry. You might have to come back to us. I think we need to do a little fiddle around to go.
Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes, Jemima, or longer if necessary. Just let us know in the chat. And Emily says, I would love to see a feature-length version of Fraser Syndrome and Me. How incredible that your film has reached other families that can now be involved. I'm just going back to make sure that I hadn't missed anything. So while we're waiting for the technology to work, which again I think is something, the more we work with technology, the more delays we have to wait for. We started doing, well, in fact, a 3 weekly live stream last year. It's now dropped down to weekly live stream. And after a while, and all of the sort of hunts in vain to work out why something hasn't worked, our colleague Robin, also known as Angry Fish, said it runs on magic, and it's beset by gremlins. It's run. There's no point in trying to understand, and I think sometimes that's all you can do. But the definition of madness used to be doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. But of course, on Zoom and with everything we do digitally, we have to keep doing the same thing over and over again till eventually we do get a different result. So I think that is just 21st century living for us. Jemima's still got her microphone off, so I don't think Jemima's ready yet. I'd love to know, Kyle, after your feature documentary, what's the next film you're going to make?
That's a harder question. I'm not really sure yet. I definitely love working in a documentary form. I found out during the making of this, since it was my graduating piece, I had to do every aspect, and I didn't really know what my thing was before this. I knew I loved filmmaking in general, but I found through this project that I really love editing. I think there's such a language to it that I think I want to I would love to explore editing, and whether that's editing for my own films or other films, that's yet to be determined. But
I watched your film thinking you had a very, very strong voice, and I thought it was beautifully made. I thought every aspect was beautifully made. But I would be surprised if you stopped at editing other people's films, put it that way. I think you have I think you have a huge amount to say. And I think as artists, we often start with ourselves. And I think that's really important. But they're still universal stories. And I think the reason that your film speaks is because it isn't just about 75 people in the world with this rare condition. It's actually about what it means to be normal, which is that all of us are normal. This is what normal looks like.
Yeah.
And I think it was a very important film about human beings and about families and about parenting. But yeah, I would be surprised if you just edited. I think you're a filmmaker, you're not an editor, and we'll all be very, very interested. Please send me your future films. Is there brilliant. Jemima's got her microphone back on. Let's just hope the gremlins stay quiet for a minute and hear what Jemima's got to say.
I was commissioned to make a short film for the BBC New Creative Scheme in March 2020, just at the start of the pandemic. The interview and training day were the last time I went after something. I was making a cutout animation, and I already had the equipment I needed to shoot at home, so that worked fine. I had all the meetings on Zoom. I talked to the editor who was doing some digital animation and the composer, and in January this year, and we did the post-production day with the Post House online too. It was all very accessible and worked well for me. The only problem was that I didn't have my PEs coming into the house because I was shielding, so my mum had to do a lot more. That meant it all took a long time.
Thanks for that, Jemima. I think that's incredibly encouraging. I mean, I haven't fortunately, because I haven't had any medical emergencies, I haven't left the house since March 2020, and indeed neither's Julie. And it's good to know that there's actually access to professional filmmaking and you can still be at home. You know, we produce an awful lot of work, and yes, we've produced hundreds and hundreds of hours on YouTube since the pandemic began, but it's not like working with the BBC and, you know, expensive Soho online editing houses. So I think it's really good to have that kind of glimpse into the professional filmmaking process. Support, access to support has been a big issue. I think this was discussed yesterday as well, that for everybody, whether you use an interpreter, whether you use a PA, any kind of assistance, it's very, very hard to get funding for, and impossible, you know, if you haven't got funding, you know, if you're not being paid, then it is impossible to get any support because the support schemes don't work like that. We do have a recording of yesterday's conversation about barriers to work, but I think shielding has really, and not just shielding, because it's also about the fact that PAs aren't there to employ because of Brexit and because of other jobs coming up in the pandemic. So I think all of us who rely on support to make work have also found those issues. We've had a lot of parents facilitating participants in projects for the very first time, and sometimes that's worked out great, but it's also worked out really, really well where we've been able to negotiate, and families have negotiated for PAs to come in proper PPE and facilitate people from home, and some people really need that. So, I mean, I don't know what the situation's like in Canada and the US, because you're in a very different, but not great either, political situation. But what we found in the UK is that hundreds of thousands of social care workers have left the UK during the pandemic, and we can't recruit more because all the immigration rules have changed with Brexit. So, and also, of course, social care is very badly paid compared to other jobs which have now got shortages. So there's two really big issues. One is kind of not letting our PAs in case they infect us and kill us, and the other issue has been not being able to recruit them in the first place. So I think that has had an impact on disabled filmmakers. One of the ideas we came up with yesterday is that disabled interns have obviously got, with the best will in the world, a lot more to offer than non-disabled interns. They're used to having to manage staff already, they're used to having to plan logistics, they're used to having to find different ways of working, so they've already got additional skills. And one of the suggestions was, well, why not buddy up interns, you know, let a non-disabled intern learn from that disabled person at the same time as carrying bags and opening doors and so on. So I think we'll be pushing for all sorts of things in the UK film industry. Maria is saying shielding has been really hard for our community. I agree. Julie, yes, do you want to switch your microphone on and speak?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for this. I haven't got my camera on because I'm still in bed. So it's sort of like it seemed for the better for everybody's blood pressure if if I don't have the camera on. I just wanted quickly to say something about Dogma and the style of Dogma. It's something which appealed to me from the very beginning when I started to learn about filmmaking, because it was simple and it was inexpensive. And somebody like myself has come into filmmaking very late in life, and I haven't had a budget. I haven't had the money. You know, I've been on state benefits for a very long time now, so there hasn't been any excess. Something that used to really wind me up was how expensive everything was. You know, cameras were expensive, editing was expensive. You know, buying this, buying that, buying the lights, and all this, that, and the other. And one of the things that has happened through the leveling, I suppose, through digital inclusion, is that phones have become more accessible. Digital phones with cameras have become more accessible. The lenses on these cameras are usually pretty good. iPads are more affordable. There is an issue, there's a massive issue, I think, around digital exclusion still. And I think that needs to be addressed at some level if the pandemics continue to expand, because there's so many people who are being left out of the communication loops. But the thing that I love about the Zoom filmmaking and using these very basic, very straightforward styles of filmmaking, and then starting to make them more sophisticated by, as Ju was saying, using filters and adjusting the sound and so on and so forth, is that they become more possible. So we get a more realistic insight into people's lives and the telling of their stories, and the opportunities for creative people, especially creative disabled people, to be able to develop the skills to express ourselves in a way which is going to be meaningful and which is going to reach a greater number of people. You know, I think one of the things that's been dreadful about the pandemic is the isolation. You know, and this is a way of reaching out and to share our stories and to share our images and our creativity, and it's a wonderful thing. I'm terribly in favour of it. But do check out the Dogma. You know, go to Google or whatever search engine you have. Check out Wikipedia. It's ever so interesting to look at the films and to check out how the collective of the Dogma specialists who set up the principles actually arrived at the principles that they arrived at. You'll see everything sort of used in the films that they started to include in their principles. And it's interesting, as much as anything, it's a bit of film history. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. I think it's really interesting to sort of say Zoom hasn't just come from nowhere. It's got roots and it's got other links to previous filmmaking movements. Maria is saying, as someone who has long COVID, this period for our community and our mental health has been extremely tough. And I agree with Julie, there's still digital exclusion. And yes, that couldn't be more right. And it depends, again, where you are. You know, in some countries of the world, there's much greater access than there are in others. I'd like to, and I'm going to pop Erin into the panel in a moment, if you could do that, Emily, who's interested in contributing some thoughts on the technical approach. I'd just like to say we have Glory Sengo in the audience, and Glory is a member of our associate drama company, Act Up Newham, which is a community drama training company. And they were able, the whole of the first lockdown, they made a film on Zoom every single week. Now, they'd never worked digitally before. I think in the course of about 3 days before lockdown hit, their devices were programmed with Zoom and Skype, but all of the updating has had to be done by themselves. And I just wanted to say, Glory, how much I appreciated that. We showed the films on our live streams every week, and they've gone on to create much, much more, and are working on another production at the moment. But on the 22nd of September, Act Up Newham presented Postcode Stories. And again, these are each individual films, but they were still very, very largely created on Zoom. They include people's drawings. You've got quite a lot of drawings in your film, haven't you, Glory? And they're literally stories of the postcodes where people live. And for any, I don't know whether this is the same in North America, but we have, with young people in gangs, we we have postcode boundaries. So if you don't stay in your own postcode and you go over a postcode boundary, you're much more likely to be attacked. So that's where some of it comes from. And there are, of course, stories of crime, but the company makes work based on their own lived experience. And what Zoom allowed was, instead of our experiences as disabled people to be as invisible as they've been everywhere, you know, they couldn't have been more invisible. Zoom has allowed us to make work about those experiences and share work about those experiences. And I just think that's so critical. Erin, welcome. Could you just pop a spotlight on Emily so that everybody can see? We get different views on Zoom depending on whether you're using a tablet or a computer. So great, Erin, I'd love to have some technical thoughts.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Erin. I'm a white woman with blonde hair, blue eyes. My hair is currently in a ponytail because it is 6:30 in the morning in Calgary at the moment. I'm wearing a black shirt with a burgundy scarf, and behind me is a very busy games room with our foosball table and my husband's collection of model cars. I wanted to contribute some thoughts on the technical aspect of using Zoom. One of the things that I found myself doing at the beginning of the pandemic was actually offering professional advice to people on how to ensure that they looked a certain way and that they sounded as good as they could in Zoom meetings, to be fair, because so many people didn't really have that particular skill set. And then when Jill and I ended up having to record parts of Sensei via Zoom, um, there was there was some interesting learning to be had there in terms of not just the not just the recording function, which was interesting, and learning how Zoom would record in a certain aspect ratio, certain compression rate, and that compression created a lot of challenges in editing. But also then in trying to encourage people to use, ironically, your phone is usually the better camera as compared to your computer. And so encouraging people to use that, giving advice on how to set it up so that you get that proper frame. And then trying to get people to understand that using things like headset for audio purposes would greatly enhance the overall quality. There's some really interesting challenges that come in that, in speaking to people, particularly in documentaries, who are not necessarily technically minded, or it's not necessarily, they don't spend all their time thinking about the aesthetic of things, and trying to give them instruction on how to get there is a really interesting challenge, I found.
I think that's so interesting, Erin. We run a monthly, on the fourth Monday of every month, we run a sort of community filmmaking workshop. Yes, just film club, basically, part of our year-round outreach program. And that's one of the things we've been focusing on over the autumn, because we felt that although people had kind of massively improved, that you really needed to go back to those basics about where you put the light, and if you don't have a separate microphone, having a wall behind you, and how the sound works and how the lighting works. I've looked at, as the festival's gone on, I've ended up thinking, actually, we should have sent these tips out to every single artist, and I shouldn't have had these assumptions that kind of we don't need to do that anymore, because I think we still need to do that on a really ongoing basis. What I'm trying to do for rehearsals for live events is at least sort of give people feedback and get people to sort of adjust things on the fly. But I think, all things considered, there's still not a lot of lack of awareness, is there? Just trying to get people to put their phones on the side is difficult enough, and often it will go the whole way round and come straight back up again.
Yeah, that one would be an interesting challenge. My favorite is still trying to explain to people why this doesn't look good in recording. And just for anyone who can't see, I tilted my computer up so that my head was at the very bottom of the frame.
Yes, we've got one of the films that's still available online from yesterday's programme is Two Deaf Yorkshiremen in Lockdown. And it's a sort of ongoing comedy. It's two deaf guys, who keep coming back to this over years in different comedy programmes, and they set it all up around lockdown, and started off quite seriously because, of course, a lot of deaf people couldn't access pandemic advice and didn't even understand there was a lockdown, because unlike some other countries, we don't have interpreters appearing on our government press conferences. And there was a big campaign around that, where's the interpreter? But we still haven't got interpreters for public health messages. But there's a very, very funny bit. The whole of the beginning is where one guy is trying to get the other guy to get his camera right. So you see the ceiling, and then you see his lap, and then you see the ceiling again. And then, and it's just those, everybody laughs because everybody's been there. But I would thoroughly recommend that as one of the BSL films. It's got captions. You do have to read it. It's not voiced, but that whole bit right at the beginning. Sort of, how many times have we been there? No, we don't want to see the ceiling. We don't want to see your lap. We don't want to see the ceiling. And not everybody's got the dexterity to move things. Some screens will either go clunk down or up. You know, I think we've done a lot of work over the first year looking with people about things like using cushions, because buying a phone stand is quite an expensive thing to do, but in my experience you've only got to sneeze and they fall over. So that sort of sense of, have you got an old cushion and can you burrow it into the cushion, and all of those things. I mean, we record this sort of stupid Clockwork Paralympics every single week, and I have to sort of get a camera on the floor and try and get these clockwork animals, which are never going in the right direction, to be filmed. And again, what I found best is actually propping it up on stuff, you know, in ways that you would never have expected to do in terms of filmmaking training. Anyway, we have just 3 minutes left. So what I'm going to ask is, people on the panel and people who are in the chat, do you want to give us your final thoughts? In the meantime, Jackie is saying the technical advice on using Zoom is enlightening. I think a lot of people are nervous of Zoom as there have been security concerns. The films can be very exposing of how people feel, their vulnerabilities. This could deter creative people. I think there's a whole other issue there, actually, around informed consent, which is a subject that I think every filmmaker needs to think about anyway. I do think, however, that the security is much, much better. You know, one of the reasons we run this as a webinar is that people can't just come in and say whatever they like unless they've been promoted to panelists. So there's all sorts of sensible precautions you can take. But absolutely, I think safer spaces policies have never been more important in the world than they are now, and particularly digitally. Kyle, did you have any final thoughts?
No, this has just been really eye-opening for me in general, because this is just something I've been mulling over for a while as well. The time just hasn't felt right for the feature because of Zoom in certain aspects. So I've been just toying with the idea of doing the pre-work with it, and that's been feeling right as of right now. But now my eyes are open and I'm ready to get moving a little more. So thank you for this. This is great.
Yeah, it's basically 24/7 access to your people all over the world. Jill,
Yeah.
did you have any last words?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the benefits of Zoom, and just in this unfortunate situation we are in worldwide right now, is that we are able to connect. We would probably never have been able to chat with you guys today if we hadn't all become so used to using Zoom. So I've just been really grateful for the opportunity to connect with people that I otherwise wouldn't have. So, and thank you very much for having us.
It's such a pleasure. Erin, did you have one last word, maybe on the technical side?
So I will say that I agree with Kyle. I actually came into this conversation mentally thinking I'm against using Zoom as a long-term solution to filmmaking because of the technical challenges. But the conversation has been eye-opening, and certainly I think you may have swayed my opinion on that. I think that there is a way forward that includes a hybrid model that would allow us to improve technical results while still making use of Zoom at its best capacity to connect with people from all different scenarios all around the world.
Well, I think the frame rate and the connectivity is only going to get better, isn't it? I mean, you know, I think that's one thing. What I think we need next is for Zoom to step up and start investing. It's not good enough at people like Netflix. If we're going to be making films on Zoom, I think it's about time that we had some Zoom filmmaking money. But it's exactly 2 o'clock, or indeed exactly 7 o'clock in Arizona and North America, or even, no, 7 o'clock, I think. So it's exactly 7 o'clock. Before you rush off to have your breakfast or your delayed lunch, I would like to just say a few thank yous again to Emily, my assistant, who's been pressing buttons in the background, to Paul Michaels, our tireless and patient British Sign Language interpreter, to Hilary from Global Real-Time Captioning, who produce all of our live captions. And I must just stress, these are live captions. When people say we have live captions and they mean we've got an app, no, it is not the same thing at all. And to our funders, Film London, Arts Council England and the National Lottery Community Fund. But of course, the biggest thank you is to all of you for joining me today. It's been absolutely fascinating. I'm going to put an edited recording up later. If anybody doesn't want to be part of it, just drop me a line, info@together2012.org.uk. And we have 4 fantastic programmes for you now to watch online. Artists' films, animations, short dramas too, and short documentaries too. And like I say, where there are publicly available links, they are now embedded in the rest of the programme. So thank you all again. Please do enter your films again next year and just stay in touch. We'd love to know what you were doing. And what we're hoping as a result of the conversations this weekend is also to set up maybe more of a, not a formal network exactly, but a new Facebook group or something, so we can continue to have these discussions as disabled filmmakers in the 21st century and the pandemic. But in the meantime, thank you again. Safe journey to the kitchen.